Alright, Battletech fans, today I'm doing a tutorial for beginners on how to paint Comstar white. So for this one, all you'll need is the contrast Apothecary white, the LEADBELCHER base, NULN oil shade, the contrast warp lightning, ARDCOTE, and the Citadel Wraithbone spray. And as for brushes, you'll just need a couple of very small brushes. One is a small base coat brush, which you see there on the top, and the second is a more fine detail brush, which I've chosen the Citadel small layer brush, which you can see there on the bottom. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so as you can see here, I've got my miniature already all sprayed down with the Wraithbone spray. I know some folks like to paint it on there, but I like to spray it because I want to work smarter, not harder. Goes a lot faster that way. I recommend if you spray it down, give it about an hour to dry before you start working on it with anything else. So I'm going to break out my Apothecary white contrast paint, and I've got my regular brush here, as you can see, and I'm just going to load up my brush with this stuff. I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but just to give you kind of an idea, and I'm just going to apply liberally here. You know, and here's the thing, as I go through, I'm going to try and just keep my eyes open for any areas where the paint is pooling too much. I want it to get into the cracks and all the little nooks and crannies and things like that, but what I don't want is I don't want it to be pooling up too much, because then it'll be obvious that this is a gray contrast and not exactly a stark white as you would expect for it to be. But I want to make sure that I get all the spots on the miniature and I don't leave any out, because I'm only going to want to do one coat of this stuff. You don't need to do more than one coat with this. Otherwise you'll go from having a white miniature to having a gray miniature. And as you can see, I put a little much on the leg actuator there, so I'm just going to use my brush to kind of wick it away so that it doesn't pool up too much. The idea here behind this contrast paint being gray is that it creates an optical illusion of white once you finish laying the whole thing down. But if you let it pool up too much, then it's going to be obvious that it's gray, and you don't want that. But just keep going back to that pot if that's what you need. And as you can see here, every now and again I get just a little more in one spot than I really wanted. So I use my brush to wick it away, and it's not a problem. Make sure you get the undercarriage there too. You don't want to miss anything there. And even if you're going to paint a spot silver later on, just go ahead and put the contrast over top of it, because you can always paint over something, you know, as long as there's not too much there. So we're going to go to the top now. And I'm just gonna, like I say, apply liberally to the top. And now if you'll look right here, you can see on these pauldrons here, or you know, whatever you call them, there's way too much liquid. So I'm just gonna use my brush, and the brush will just naturally pick the paint up. So you don't have to, you know, do too much work. Get the back here just the same as I did the front. Just being careful not to get too much on there and wicking away any bits where I feel like it's got too much. See right there on that gun, if you can see that. I feel like right now I've got about the perfect amount of paint on my brush. Just enough to get it on there, but not so much that, you know, it drowns all the details off of the miniature. Not going to worry about getting the gun, and I'm not going to worry about getting that antenna up there either. I'm just gonna leave that be. And all I'm gonna do before I let this guy dry is I'm gonna go back over it, and I'm just gonna give it a look and make sure that there isn't any spots where things have pooled up more than I want. If there is, I'll just wick it away. And I'm also gonna make sure that I haven't missed any spots, because you don't want to have to go back over this thing. So if you missed something, just go ahead and pick it up. Alright, I feel reasonably confident about that, so I'm going to go ahead and just let this dry, and we're going to come back to it in just about an hour and see how she looks. Alright, it's looking pretty good so far, if you ask me. Now, it looks like I did miss just a little bit on the front here, so I'm going to go ahead and correct that. But if you wanted to at this stage, you could also do a dry brushing with a softer white like Praxetti White or Rack White from Citadel. But for beginners and simplicity's sake, I'm not going to do that at this step, because I feel like for beginners, you can still achieve a good look without dry brushing at this stage. Alright, and so now that we're back from that, we're going to bust out the LEADBELCHER, which is what I like to do all my silver in. And I've got, for this one, a different brush than I had last time. I've got my small layer brush on this one. I'm just going to take a small amount of paint on my brush here, and I'm going to start painting these guns, the machine guns, silver. Alright, now I'm going to flip it to the other side. Just the exact same thing as before, we're just going to paint that little gun right there. Just try not to get it on the white, but here's a little trick. If you accidentally swipe some of the white with the silver paint, as long as you catch it right away, you can take your brush, dip it in the water, and with a bunch of water in the bristles, what you can do is you can wipe away that silver paint, and nobody will know that you did it. Nobody will be the wiser. Alright, let's move on to the front gun. Let's work on this antenna. It's a little bent. That's how it came to me when it was shipped. Alright, and the next thing I'm going to paint is the connecting joints here for the hips. I'm going to make sure to get the back of those connecting joints too. And the last thing I'm going to paint silver on this thing is going to be these little ball joints right here in the feet. Alright, I'm going to let that dry and come back to it with some NULN oil in just a few minutes. My small layer brush. And I'm going to load up my brush with the NULN oil, not too much, about halfway. And then I'm just going to start painting over all the silver stuff. Give it a good little coat there. Try to avoid getting it on the white if it's at all possible. Just going to do my best here. Alright, other side. Gravity will do most of the work for you here. Alright, let's get that gun barrel. antenna. And let's get the ball joints in the feet. Those hip connectors. Boom, boom. Don't forget to get the back. Boom, boom. All right. Now while that's drying, I am going to bust out my warp lightning contrast. Same brush. And I'm going to let gravity do the work for me here. Start working on that cockpit. Now, I'm just going to put a little bit of this stuff in my brush. I'm not going to load it up to Kingdom Come here. Is just dab it on the cockpit. And just gently just try to push it around so that it fills up those spaces. Boom. Let's give that a little bit of time to dry and we'll come back and check on it. Alright, so we have a look that I'm pretty satisfied with, so I'm going to finish off this cockpit with a little bit of this Ard coat. It's going to give it that glossy sheen to it that's going to make it look like glass. And usually one dab will get you all the way through. One dab will do ya. And I've gone ahead and finished off the sides with a little bit of flat black and a wraithbone white in the front to denote the front hex facing. I've also put a little bit of Army Painter green flock on there just for a quick basic base that'll get you tabletop ready in no time flat. So if you've enjoyed this content, do me a favor and hit that subscribe bell down there and turn on all notifications so you can find out where Battlebound's going to turn up next. Thank you so much for joining me once again on Painter's Pit. I'm Tuckdavian, and we will see you next time out on the Space Lanes.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.
Crowdfunding is when lots of people give you small amounts of money to help your passion project come to life.